Right. And we're off. So,
oh, Heather Bunting says she's got feedback as well.
Yeah, sorry, Heather. That's the chat. So I'm just going to put my chat on. I can also hear feedback. Yes, it sounds like an echo. It does. Sorry about that. I don't know if you've got your chat on, Liz, so that you can read out any questions that I don't see.
Yeah.
So let's just start by saying good evening and welcome to Speak Your Mind. My name is Dr. Maria Kempinska, and I am here with my lovely friend and colleague, Liz Sanday, who is a spiritual life coach. To some extent,
she's getting some feedback as well. So
yeah, sorry, Jackie, I don't know where it's coming from. It could be somebody that's sort of come in, and I think it's disappeared. Tonight we're talking about the vast subject of narcissism. And the reason I'm talking about narcissism is twofold. I'm in the entertainment business. And it also always helps me understand how to deal with people. But as a psychotherapist, it's when I deal with people's minds, I deal from the inside out, if you like. What are they dealing with? What's their problem? People come to me with their problems. How are they being affected by the world? And when you go onto YouTube, that's what you see on YouTube. When there are diagnostics that happen, it's mostly in terms of people that go for help. So just to give you an idea of the diagnostics that you will see on YouTube before we get into what you experience in relation to a narcissist, there is something called the Diagnostic Manual, and it's an organizational scheme. And this is what psychiatrists and psychologists use. And in there, they do what they call clusters. So bearing in mind, these are to help the person who has a disorder. In that disorder, they're put into 3 clusters, okay, A, B, C. And they're called, in their terms, this isn't my term, by the way, as a caveat, they call it mad, bad, or sad, which I think is quite useful. So the mad ones are cluster A, and they're the ones that are seriously over the edge, over the Rubicon. And we know that they are idiosyncratic. They've got behavior that is sort of very odd, egocentric, very strange. They don't really compartmentalize anywhere, and they don't fit into the world properly. And you know there's something wrong. So there could be a schizophrenic who hears voices and so on. So there's a lot of that style of mental illness or disorientation, if you like, distraction, disorder that they're experiencing. Let's jump to cluster C, which is anxiety and fear. So they're the people that are obsessive compulsive and they're avoidant. So they don't actually communicate very well. There's something that's going wrong. They're being tied up in their minds all the time and they're constantly worried. Paranoia would be on the other scale of that, but it'll be part of that on the extreme. But the one we're talking about today is cluster B, which is the bad one. And although you'll go in and listen to a number of these names, it's a number of these styles that are all compounded that start with narcissism. So narcissism as a disorder is the root to a number of illnesses. So let's start by saying we are all narcissistic. Sorry to let you know that. But it's true. And if we are not narcissistic, we give away too much to the other person or to other people. So we need to be aware of ourselves. So when you do your own therapy, it's about you. It has to be. So you need to know who you are, how you deal with the world, what's going on in your life. How do people affect you? How do you get on? How do you make something happen? And you need to know who you are very often, or you give your part of yourself away. If you're not strong in yourself, you will give yourself away to somebody who is a narcissistic abuser. And we'll come to that person shortly. But when we talk about cluster B, that includes antisocial behavior, bipolar, borderline personality, and on the extreme, you've got the psychotic or the psychopath, okay? So they are from one area, they lack empathy, they're antagonistic, they are very entitled, we know that, and they're very combative, they can be erratic, and they can't regulate their own emotions. And that regulating your emotion is the key, I think, to anybody's mental health. And that's what you do when you know yourself. You know what's happening inside you. You recognize your behavior patterns for you. So that gives you an overall view of what you will see out there. If you go into therapy, the therapist will sit with you and try to explore you, your dynamic. Who are you? And very often people will come in because they're in a poor relationship, that somebody's doing something. They're out of kilter. They're not in a relationship where they are both thriving from the relationship, or they were and it's gone. But very often, if you turn up and you are in a relationship that has got narcissistic abuse in it, you will have started in a relationship that was absolutely amazing, because the way the narcissist starts is by totally adoring you, and you totally adore them, because they mirror you. They tell you how amazing you are. You tell them they're amazing, and you keep this. It becomes reciprocal, and it's what they call the hot frog syndrome. It's not that you are thrown into a relationship with somebody that starts abusing you. You start in a relationship with somebody totally adores you, and you have something to give them, but you don't know that because you fall in love. They fall in love with you, and they keep telling you how amazing you are. You keep telling them how amazing they are. And there's a lot of that toing and froing that is so marvelous. And very often they will constantly want to see you. They constantly are in touch with you. They constantly keep telling you how amazing you are. And very often people get into this relationship very, very, very quickly. As a caveat, not every relationship you get into very quickly is going to be narcissistic either. This is why the world of mental health is so complicated, beyond complicated, because everybody's individual. But that's what often happens. You get into a relationship, it's quick, you want to see each other a lot. Suddenly you're totally wrapped up with each other and you're entwined. And then, as with a hot frog, they tell you the hot frog syndrome is 1 minute if a frog's put into a hot bowl of water, or a boiling pot of water, it will jump out. If it's put into cold water and they turn the heat up and it gradually heats up, it stays there and it dies. And that's the same with a narcissistic syndrome, abuse, that you're in a great relationship and gradually the person starts showing themselves. When they've got enough of your attention, where they're entwined, you're both entwined in the relationship, things start going wrong for one person rather than the other. But as Liz was saying, surely both people get something from the relationship, and they do. There's no question. You must want something in return, or else you wouldn't be in there. So as a person who's in a relationship with somebody who's narcissistic, you must need something that they've got. So if you've got somebody who is, say, in the theatre, that's the easiest one to say. We've often seen people who are, in Los Angeles, if you say, they have lots of people flooding around them that want to be in a relationship with them, because a relationship with a narcissist is better for some people than to be, going out with a person who waits on tables, because their life is much more dynamic, it's much more fun. So what do they get in return? They get a totally new lifestyle, they might get money, and they might be used and abused and thrown away, but during that period of time, they've got something from it. But what we're talking about is a normal relationship. That's an extreme. And when the perfection starts fading, or the narcissist starts realizing they've got enough from that person, they start abusing you, because equally you will start seeing that things aren't going the way you wanted them to go, or there is something that is wrong, because gradually they start criticizing you, and it will start small. And something will be wrong. You don't turn up in time. You say the wrong thing at the dinner table. You're not wearing the right clothes. If anybody hasn't been out with a narcissist, I'd be quite surprised, actually. But it will be, you know, the stories I've heard, people will turn up and the partner will say, you can't wear that. No, go and change that before we go out. Or don't wear those earrings. But you don't know why. There's no reason for it. It's not like you're wearing, you know, sort of party dress to a funeral. There's a reason for it. No, it's just that they want to control you. And gradually that control becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, if you're entwined in some way, that is when it becomes difficult, because you start believing that they know what they're doing and that they have a right to say to you, because you want to please them. And you're not going to argue with them all the time, because if you're not the type to argue, and lots of partners in these relationships don't do that, then you're going to go along with the controlling factor from the narcissist. Why are they like this? Let me come back. Let me talk to why are people like that. The narcissist in some way is devoid of a part of their upbringing that should be normal. They were brought up very often with a parent or both parents that were neglecting. They neglected them, or the dog, but they were neglected in some way. It doesn't mean that all parents willingly neglected a child. That doesn't always happen like that. It can happen accidentally. But if they have been neglected as a child, they need to know that they are validated. A child doesn't know who they are until they get the feedback from the parent, from the carer, who will tell them, who are you? This is who you are. I love you. You have a right to be here. And it's in those very early stages that the early stages of narcissism and the most primordial approach to relationships happen. So if you have been neglected or abandoned, the child will feel that as they grow up, because you can't fulfill that later on if you don't know what you're trying to fulfill as a human being. So if you go into therapy, you don't know what you're lacking. You don't know that you're afraid of being abandoned. You don't know that you're in an avoidant relationship. All you know is your relationships are going wrong. That's why you have to go back to the early stages, because when we as children are brought up, or babies, the way the brain works is like, I put it into 3 parts. One part of the brain is the basic brain, the primordial brain, the reptilian brain, the food, the food, water, you know, can I crawl, can I eat, do I get love? And that's the very, very primal brain. And that's what is in play as a child. Am I being reacted to? When I cry, do I get food? When I am thirsty, am I fed? Am I looked after? And that part of the brain, if it's not looked after, the whole brain doesn't develop well. And that was a study done in Romania, actually, with the Romanian children. They were all looked after with food and drink, but they were not given love, TLC. And without TLC, the brain does not develop. So babies' brains in Romania, although they were, you know, sort of clothed and fed, they were not touched. And when they weren't touched and showed they were cared for, their brains shrunk or just didn't develop. And this was done through MRI scans. So as a child, anybody who hasn't had enough attention for one reason or another will be grasping for that attention, will be wanting that from somebody. And when we go into a relationship, that is replayed. That's the basic brain. The middle part of the brain is where we feel our emotions. So that's what happens. It's almost like it absorbs our emotions, it absorbs our memories. And gradually, as we grow, about the age of 8, you get your language comes into play. And that's when the front part of your brain, the neocortex, you can start analyzing things. The words come into play. You can start making better sentences. You step away from yourself. And that is the part of the brain that we use when you go into therapy. Who am I? What have I done? Why am I feeling these emotions? Where's it coming from? Which part of my world is it coming from? Why do I feel neglected? Why isn't that person giving me enough time and attention? Or why are they shouting at me? What's going on? So you try to understand yourself, but it's the neocortex that if you engage that part of your brain, that's the more rational part of your brain, that you can understand what you're going through. If you understand yourself. So as a therapist, or if you're in therapy, the whole dynamic is, who am I? Where did this come from? Do I learn the signals? When you're in a relationship, it's very difficult to get out of a relationship because you're so tied in, and especially if you've got children. And if you have children, children can sometimes be part of the problem for a narcissist. A number of men, when they are fathers, become fathers for the first time, walk away from relationships because they can't handle somebody else being given the attention that they feel they should have, that they were neglected. They don't do this consciously. This is the crucial thing to understand. A narcissist has no clue why they're behaving like this. They just behave like this. If you're in a relationship with a narcissist who is abusive, it's down to you to work out what's going on and to get out, to understand the red flags, understand what's happening and how to actually handle it, because they are not, they can't handle everything inside them. It's all scrambled inside them. It doesn't make sense. All they know is that they want you, they want to keep you, you are the most important thing to them. It's not interesting to them whether they treat you well or not. All they're interested in is the control to know you're always going to be there. That is so crucial, because the fear of abandonment for most of them is so powerful. And that's why when that is kicked off in any way, if you have a similar thing and you kick it off inside each other, you've got this terrible dance that goes off. I'm leaving. No, I'm leaving. And that can become quite violent. Or if you're not like that and they start abusing you and hitting you, that's because they want you to stay where you are, and they see that you might be wanting to leave. And that's the way they keep you trapped. So there's inside them, the motive is so primordial, it's so primary, it's so profound that they react in a physical way. Now, women do it differently to men, but not all women. A lot of women do hit men, and I don't want it to be just a male thing, but at this moment in time, it's still 80-20, but I think the more we're going on in the world, it's going to grow more and more, and women are becoming more and more narcissistic. So how do you know when you're going into an abusive relationship? How do you know when somebody's going to be narcissistic? And it's, again, Liz and I were talking about this. You've got to take your time before you get into a relationship and see the flags.
Look before you leap.
Before you leap. The thing is, very often you will see, when they talk to you, are you getting something in return? Are you always asking questions of the other person? Do they care about you? Do they contact you? If you don't contact them for a while, do they come back and contact you? What is it they're after from you? Also, look at their background, find out from their parents. What were their parents like? What were their parents' relationships like? And I know people say, you know, oh, it's all to do with the parents. I'm afraid it is. A lot of it is to do with the parents. If the parents can't relate to each other, the kids will find it difficult to relate. They've got to relearn that. So when you go into therapy, you're relearning a number of strategies. What do they talk to you about? What do they want from you? I know people that have, you know, been with a narcissist, and they take a lot from them. They can take their identity from them. I know a lot of narcissists that want to be that person, their partner. They not only want to, especially in if one person's more successful than the other and they want success, they will pretend that that success belongs to them. I did that. I made her successful. I made him successful. She would be nothing without me. He would be nothing without me. You know, I did that. And they don't give the other person the separate identity. Now, of course, we all get blended in a relationship. We are sort of, you want to be that power couple that you get on. But if you are lost in that relationship, and you are forever kowtowing to somebody who's a lot stronger than you will lose a part of yourself. There's no question. But it's how do you regain that when you finally decide you've got to get out? And what is it at which point do you get out? So one of the stories that somebody told me was that he was in a great relationship with a woman, and they decided to move in together. Everything was hunky-dory, and gradually she was picking at him, complaining, criticizing the way he looked, the way he did this. His music wasn't very good. He wasn't very good at doing things. His cooking wasn't very good. But he stuck with it because he thought, well, yes, she must be right. Eventually, they decided to buy a property. And they both agreed they'd buy a property outside the city, which really didn't suit him. But he thought, well, I'll be with her, and that's great. They moved out to the city, bought somewhere, and she decided to move back into town. So he was left outside and she was in town. But the relationship, he couldn't move from that relationship because he lived in a house that they both owned together. And this is actually, when you look at the city and you look at business relationships, that's what happens in a lot of business relationships, that men are in business relationships in the city 5 days a week and then go home to their partners at the weekends. Now, sometimes it's genuine, but very often they can spend the week doing what they want to do, and at weekends they come home to their wives. So it's an interesting dynamic. But what are you getting from that relationship? And how do you see, and what do you do with the partner when it's all going wrong? And there's only one way you can deal with this. And this is the absolute truth, which is the hardest thing to do, is to stop all contact. When you're away from somebody, you have to stop contact. You cannot think that you can turn them around. You can't. The only person that can turn somebody around is themselves. The only person that you can turn around is yourself. But you might be more empathic and you'll listen to other people when they tell you there's something wrong. But you have to walk away. And I think that's the hardest thing. They say it takes about 7 times before a person who's being abused will leave somebody who is the abuser. 7 times. That is a lot of times before somebody actually leaves. And if you recall, there used to be somewhere called the Women's Refuge, where women used to leave and they used to take their children from an abusive husband. Now we're talking about physically abusive husbands. And they used to leave, they used to go into the refuge. And Erin Pitsey, who ran the refuge, she started it in Chiswick. She said over and over again, the women would go back to their husbands. Now, I don't know if that happens so much today, but what it did used to happen, it does happen, Claire. So yes,
yeah, it does.
It does. So they go back because it's familiar. And also it's familiar pattern to them. They know what they're going to get. So if you're in a relationship and you know the dance, very often you're not conscious that it's a dance. Very often you've been brought up like that. If your parent was narcissistic or abusive, you're used to that. That's who are you? You're that person that knows how to dance within that abuse, if you like. You know, when somebody's shouting at you, oh, they'll stop. You know, if they're shouting, I'll just say, oh, it's all right, darling. You know, I'll get this for you or that for you. But you can keep that dance going because you know how it's being manipulated. Very often it's when somebody else or your children are being affected that you can see you need to leave. And that is the sign, because you're so embroiled in it. But what's the cost for you when you leave? There's always a cost.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing, because, and this is the biggest point about narcissistic abuse, they will aim to destroy you. The extreme ones will aim to get rid of you, destroy you, because if they can't have you, nobody will have you. And it's painful. It's beyond painful. It's like a death and worse, because a lot of the abusive narcissists, and we're talking about the malignant narcissists. Just to give you a view, actually, as well, there are 4 types of narcissists now being, they design it, they put it into types. There's 4 types. They've got the classical narcissist, who's grandiose, egotistical, you know, the Hollywood style, egotistical, they don't listen, look at me, entitled, big, pompous, you know, all these people that you know. I'm sure you know somebody like that. And, you know, so if you go out with a classical narcissist, you know that you're going to be fawning behind them because they're always in front. Or in some cultures, actually, some women will never walk beside their partner. In some cultures, a woman is never allowed to tell their son off. So that child will grow up dominating a woman, expecting a woman to do everything for them. But in our culture, in the Western culture, that is a classical narcissist that we see, and you can see them over in Los Angeles. It's the perfect place. If you want to get a hit of narcissism, Hollywood's the place to go. Before I get onto the malignant one, there's also the covert narcissist. This is an interesting one because this is the person who is the quiet narcissist. If you do something well, if you get praise, well, why didn't I get that? You've written a book and you get a publishing award. They might say, well, why haven't I got a publishing award? And you might say, well, you've not written a book. But no, that's not relevant to them. Or you've just been given a radio program. Well, why haven't I got a radio program? Well, no, that's because you're not making something happen. They don't see that you have to actually work at it. They just envy you so much, but it's so hidden. But they're hypersensitive to what's going on. They're envious, and they'll have tantrums. At times they'll be cold and distant. If you're praised, for example, if you're looking fantastic and everybody at the party is telling you you're looking amazing, they won't tell you you're looking amazing and how wonderful it is to be with you. They'll just be cold and distant. They'll avoid you because they need the praise themselves. And they're so covert. And it's actually, that is quite, even in a way, it's one of the worst ones because it's like that passive aggressive, that you don't know what you've done wrong, but you've shone. Today has been your day, you've done well at work. Well, why didn't I get somebody telling me I'm great? Always, they want to take the shine off you. Not that they want to take it off you, they want the same as well as you. In fact, the worst one, you know, the worst thing is also you might find it amongst your friends where they want to be you. Suddenly their hair changes to your colors, their glasses are the same as yours. They wear the same clothing. They title themselves in the same way. They want to be the person you are, with the identity that you have, with the qualifications that you have, with the book that you've written. They might even, you know, if it's extreme, they might even take another book that somebody else has written and put their own cover on it. Because they eventually lie, because they need to lie to get the feeding, the narcissistic feed that they've been missing. And I think there isn't one person that hasn't experienced that somewhere. When it becomes truly a problem, it's a borderline personality problem, where they start identifying with you because they can't see their own identity. But we're talking about narcissists who are a little bit more deliberate. Some people, when they're over the edge, they can't help it. But narcissists very often deliberately do this. Then you've got the communal narcissist. Now, they're the ones that are saving the world. Look, it's all right, darling. I'm just going off to another charity function and they're giving me the award because I've just helped donate, you know, 10 million pounds. Or, you know, I'm just so great. Look at what I've done. You know, I just walked 10,000 miles for charity. But, you know, don't let anybody know, but this is what I do. So they use their good ability, if you like, to help the world, but they need to be seen to be doing it. They're not just doing it and not seen. They have to let everybody know. You know, I'm working for, you know, a child who's got cancer, but they tell everybody, it's in all the papers and everybody follows them. Not that somebody else has organized it, they have to have it organized. So, but they absolutely attach themselves to their ability to be recognized by doing good somewhere. To some extent, does it matter if they're like that? Not really. But that is now distinguished as a type of narcissism. But the one that is the worst one is the malignant narcissist. And that's the one that is really threatening. And on the extreme, it goes into psychopathy, where they will kill somebody. But we're talking about the ones that's the middle ground, and that's where we normally sit, on the middle ground. And what is that person like? They are seriously mean. They enter into a relationship not because of love, because they don't know what love is. The love that they've always experienced from a young child has always been, they've been devoid of that. And I'm not talking about blaming a parent. It's an observation. So what they want from that person is a reflection of themselves. That's where the term comes from. The myth of Narcissus. He fell in love with his own reflection in the pool, and Echo heard his voice and kept repeating his voice. That's the myth of narcissism, but he's a malignant narcissist. So when he comes into a relationship, he might spot you as being the best looking in the room. And because you're the best looking, he is going to end up with you. That's his decision. And you will fall for him because he'll make sure that he flatters you so much that you will fall for him. Or she will fall, make sure that she spots you as the best in the room, and she will make sure that you fall for her. And they often do whatever it takes to get you, because for you, you represent something that they need that will either increase their self-value. You have to have a value to them. You will increase their value, or you will make them feel a lot better. So you either keep replenishing what's called, you become their narcissistic supply, where you keep replenishing their feeling of being good, healthy, strong, worthwhile, have value, that no matter what they do, you will say, it's okay. It doesn't matter because I'm still here. And the more you're still there, the more that their behavior continues to get worse and worse and worse. So it's like an adult wrapped around a baby that isn't getting what they need. And that is the malignant narcissist. So if you do not give your child food or drink, they will beat you, they will hit you, they will get cross with you. That's what happens. You pick them up and you try to stop them and they won't stop. That is a narcissist, a very malignant narcissist. But the trouble is they know they're doing it. So they will lie to you, they will cheat, they will tell you one thing and do another until they get what they want from you. So they will make sure that you're, say, at home and they're going off with their friends. They will look at your phones, but you can't do what you want to do, but they will do what they want to do with whomever they want to do it with. Because this is, their life is more important and you are there almost to serve them. And the problem is that very often people do. If you're brought up to understand that you care for somebody, the empath, they call it the empath, I don't know why actually, because most people are empathic. But you know, you are brought up knowing that you should care for somebody, that caring is what happens. You in turn, you understand how people feel. So by the age of 3, if you haven't learned that, it's very difficult to learn later. And you can often see people who don't know that by the time they're growing up, if they're cruel to animals, if they steal at a young age without care, burn things down, if they are horrible to their friends, they play games with their friends. You know, they come in and they'll say, "Mummy, mummy, somebody's hit me." Or they've all ganged up on me. And the mother will say, there, Johnny, I'm so sorry that they've ganged up on you, such nasty children. And then when the other parents call the children in and say, well, what's happened? Why are you like this? Well, he came out and he started punching everybody. But the child doesn't say that, and the mother doesn't look for that either. So the parent can reinforce their bad behavior. Or if the child is a golden child, that's another dangerous thing. If a mother has always doted on the child, whether it's a boy or girl, but very often I'm afraid it's boys, you don't stand a hope in hell with that child if they grow up, because they have to recognize that what they demanded as a child and got, they will demand and want to get that from you. Mm. And no matter how much you try to fulfill that promise, it's not going to happen, because you cannot live your life like that. And especially when children come along. And children are very often the divide in their relationship. And that doesn't mean it's the child's fault. And this is why it's so terrible, because children often feel it's their fault. I came along and daddy left. No, you came along. It's not your fault. No, he didn't know it was going to be you, Jane or Fred. He just knew there was a child that was going to take the mother's full attention. And in a marriage, what happens is when a woman has a child, she also resonates the attributes of what the mother had. He now realizes that this partner is now, oh, is she like my mum? Oh, I can hear her telling the child off. Come on then, Fred, come and get your clothes. Well, that's what my mum used to sound like. Suddenly your wife, your partner, your lover sounds like your mother. And they say when you get into a relationship, you're now suddenly, you're not just two of you in bed, you've got six of you. That's if you haven't got step parents. So you've got the couple and both their parents sort of next to them, really. And then if you've got step parents, you've got them as well, because they all influence you as you grow up. So suddenly a partner might say something to you that sounds like the father, or something your father used to say, and you respond accordingly. But coming back to the narcissist, and they're suddenly in a relationship, they have children because that's what, they thought they needed, but the child is taking everything away. How do they treat the parent? How do they treat the woman? They turn to the woman and they realize that the way they used to treat her doesn't work, because the woman's approach is to look after the child. That's her nature. That's inherent. It's, like that Aesop fable with, isn't it a scorpion and some other, let's call it a frog for the sake of it, calling it another frog. And he's going through the water and he carries the frog to the other side. And then at the end, he stings the frog. And the frog says, well, why could you do that? He said, it's in my nature. And that's it. You've got to look at the nature of somebody you're with, that's inherent within them and the behavior they're going to have towards you. If you've always given them all the attention, you get married and they lose that attention, they could very well walk away. And that's why 1 in 3 men in relationships walk away within the first year. That's why often relationships break down, because the one or other cannot stand the child being the focus of the attention. But if he doesn't want to walk away and he wants your attention more and more, it's how does he control you? Because as a woman has a child, she too will grow. And that's the problems with diagnostics. They assume that people don't grow and don't change, but they do. And as you grow, you start reflecting on your life through your children. How did you affect them? How were you affected? What happened to you? And hormonally, this instinct kicks into a woman. People never address the fact that when you have a baby, your hormones change as a woman, and those hormones affect your memories. So you might start behaving like your mother, unwittingly. And if your mother had a bad relationship with your father, you might be carrying that through in some way. But the husband then might feel that, but they don't feel it consciously. This is all unconscious behavior. So if you're not aware of your own behavior, if you can't talk to your partner, if you don't have that ability to open up and discuss it, you are going to have a very difficult relationship. And there's so many books written about the dance of a family, you know, dance of a relationship, what's going right, what's going wrong. But you end up in a dance and the kids are caught in the middle of this very often. And you try to make sure it doesn't happen, but it does. But what happens when you do decide to leave? It's too much. They're abusive. There's something else going on. And there are seriously abusive relationships out there. We mustn't gloss over the relationships that can happen. And I've heard of terrible, terrible sexual abuse that happens in families where a mother stands by while her child is being sexually abused, while the father's doing something, or a grandfather, and nothing is done. That is extreme abuse as well. That a mother being devoid of protecting a child is just as abusive. So a mother permitting the other parent to abuse a child and not doing anything about it is equally abusive. So what happens if you don't step in and stop your child from being abused? There's something wrong there. So you're almost you're condoning in some way the behavior because you're not acting on it. And we're not taught about that. That's the problem. But if somebody is abusive to you, how do you deal with it? And you've got a child, you have to get away. And you have to protect yourself. So if you're in an abusive relationship, the best thing to do is prepare. If it's seriously abusive, you've got to prepare covertly. So you've got to get your family members on side. And as much as I hear this quite a lot, and it saddens me actually, when people say, oh, you've got an abusive parent, leave your, leave your family. Don't turn to your family. You know, they're this, they're that. They criticize you, but fundamentally, they're the ones that are going to help you when you need help, most often than not. So don't always abandon your family. You might need them in times of extreme circumstances when somebody's being super, abusive to you. If they're hitting you, if they're taking things from you, if they're holding on to your bank account, if they're telling you what to wear all the time, if they're constantly criticizing you, they are gradually picking at you, and you are being diminished all the time. And it's down to your family who will tell you. And when it's time to go, you've got to do it covertly. You've got to open up a separate bank account. You've got to tell your parents you're going to leave. You've got to get somewhere to live. And if you've got children, you've got to use somewhere as a refuge. And you've got to make sure that you've got help, that you don't go back, because the narcissist in that particular occasion will try to get you back and the dance will begin again. And it's not until you realize that the dance will begin again and you experience it again, and I know Claire was nodding to this, you will go back because they persuade you to go back. You'll go back, the children will experience it again, and you'll leave. And then you'll go back again, because you cannot believe that somebody can keep treating you like this. And I defy anybody to say that hasn't been in a relationship where you've gone back over and over again because you think you can turn it around. The fact of the matter is you can't. And I'd love to be able to say that we're all saviors, that we can all do this wonderful thing where you take somebody who is a murderer and you stop them from murdering forevermore. You can't. And that's what women do when they marry a murderer in prison. They fall in love and they really think that they've got that capacity to save. You can't. The people you can save are your children. The people you can save are yourselves or your friends. But when you're entwined in a relationship like that, if that person can't see what they're doing, you cannot save them. And on the extreme, most narcissists who are extreme will never, ever look at themselves. That's also a telltale sign. If they don't like being told there's something wrong, that means that there is something wrong with them. Everybody in a relationship should be able to say, look, you know, the pasta's a bit tough today. You know, and without the other person going crazy. But, you know, if they go crazy about the pasta, let's put it into perspective. Everything else goes at that point, doesn't it? Or if they start, if you say, you know, you shouldn't be wearing that tie, and they go crazy, you know, there's something wrong. And you have to take that as a sign to get out. Start making decisions that this is not going to work, because they're not going to work it themselves. Russ wrote about the frog and the scorpion. The frog worries that the scorpion would sting him. The scorpion says he won't. The scorpion gets on the frog's back, and halfway across the river, the scorpion stings him. As they both start to drown, the frog asks, "Why did you do that?" "Because it's in my nature," the scorpion replied. And that is the truth of life. And I think Liz was telling me about one of her clients who is very spiritual. And that if you're spiritual, and I hear this all the time, forgive somebody. You know, forgive them. They don't, you know, it's you, you're making them do that. Or they don't really mean it. Or they've been hurt so much that they're not going to hurt you. It's never going to happen again. And again, the savior complex comes out. And we've got too much of that in our society.
Oh.
Where people think that they are going to be able to save the world. It's not going to happen like that. The narcissist, yeah, exactly. But, you know, the thing is, in our society at the moment, people have to get real. And the reality of life and people's minds are this, that only you can change your mind. You can be shown the way, and friends can do that, families can do that. Your experience can also teach you that you've been kicked quite a lot. And if you continue going back, that is what that person's going to do. And that's why they say go into therapy. But very often narcissists and psychopaths who end up murdering people don't do that. And that's the scorpion. So the only way you can really help somebody is if you see them trying to help themselves. But the red flags are always early days. Do they care for you? Do they allow you to talk? Do they know who you are? Are they interested in you? But also, as you get deeper into that relationship, what do they want from you? Who are they in relation to you? And everybody who's come out of a narcissistic relationship says they learn that they have to be more circumspect. They don't trust as much. That they have to understand that any relationship they go into can end up like this, because the trouble is, if we've been in a relationship like that once, that means that you've had something to do with that as well. So you need help. You need to go into therapy as well to find your own dynamic. Who am I here? Who am I now that all these bits have been taken away from me? Because if you're a kind person or you care about people, every time somebody incorrectly has a go at you, criticizes you, it chips a little bit away from that person. That person's diminished every time because you know it's a lie, but somehow you can't see yourself. One client was saying they used to have to go into the bathroom to look in the mirror to see who they were, because they'd lost themselves in the relationship. They'd lost themselves in the criticism of the other person, that they weren't who they thought they were. Fee said the narcissist I was married to was a great player of being the martyr, poor me. Marcus says, I actually did marry a hot frog. She's French. We'll come back to that one. But yes, the martyr. Very often in a relationship, you are totally oblivious to the lies that are being told about you. That's happened. And it sounds like Fee had that. So they behind your back will tell the world that you don't care for them, that you're doing something to them. It's projection. So whatever they're doing to you, they tell the world that you're doing that to them. So the world feels sorry for them. So at the end of the day, everybody says, oh my goodness, of course you've left her. because she's the one that was so bad to you. But really, the reality of it is they've set you up and deliberately set you up. Don't think that it is not deliberate. It is. Get away from the thinking because you don't think like that. They don't think like that. They do. And the worst thing that anybody has to learn is that these people who behave like that are deliberate. And because you're not, you think they're not going to be, but they are. They're very deliberate. They're very calculating, because what they want from you, they didn't have as a child. And by hook or by crook, they're going to get it. And they will take your name from you. They will take anything you've done. If you've been a designer, you're a fashion designer, they'll pretend it's them that's designed the clothing. And you won't be able to stand up for yourself. And you see it in business all the time. Business says that it's okay to do that. No, it's not. It's not okay. And in a way, you've got to treat a relationship up to a point like a business relationship. You've got to get something from it as well. And very often, if you're like this in a marriage, you'll be like this in business. So it serves you well to get yourself together enough to understand your own value. Who are you? And the great thing about being in a narcissistic relationship and getting out of it, you start realizing who you are, or at least what you don't want in your life. The arguments you had meant that you weren't prepared to go down that road. Write it down. Write down the arguments. What were you arguing about? What made you angry? Write it down. That gives you an indication of who you are, what your basic boundaries are. And that's so powerful for you as a person to know who you are, what you want, what you desire, the person you want, the good bits of the narcissist and the bad bits. Write it down. I know it sounds calculating, but if you have been trapped by a narcissist, you've got to be a little bit more calculating. And until you start back and observe yourself, you can't step away from a narcissistic relationship, because nobody else is going to do it for you. You will be there while you're beaten black and blue. And sometimes it can be not only damaging, it can be downright, sort of crippling, or at worst, they can kill you if it's too extreme. Russ says, Maria is so right. A very close friend married a man who'd been in jail for 27 years for murder. I met him several times. It was an absolute disaster, and it transpired everything about him was false. He went from utterly charming to a real horror show. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that, Russ? That's enough. Liz, I think there may be
that's probably enough.
That's enough. Yeah, it is like that. We think
it was, and the fascinating thing about it, I'm sitting here listening, sort of with my jaw hitting the table, the desk, because this was a cause célèbre in Los Angeles, and the Los Angeles Times had run features on him, and there was a big campaign about him, and they became pen pals. And then he came out and she married him, which I thought was, a little bit worrying. And I did meet him several times, and he was charming and delightful and couldn't be nicer. And it turned out it was all an act that lasted many years. It lasted several years, but it was an absolute act. And when he dropped the mask, I don't know what the proper terminology is, Maria, you're the doctor in this area, but when he dropped the mask, what was behind it was just terrible.
Well, it's Jekyll and Hyde in the story, isn't it? The false self. And that's exactly, you're right. They do have a false mask that they wear, and it's what's behind that mask. And I think we all have to be aware of that. Liz, did you want to ask a question?
Well, it's, just as Ross said, wow, lots and lots of information. And I think there's probably people have got some questions in their own unique experiences. But if you've managed to get away, and as you say, sort of protect yourself, have that distance. But what do you do for yourself to get over it?
I think that's such a good question, and it's such an important question, because very often they come into therapy, and I think therapy is good because it helps you understand where you got attached. How did you play that role? What did you want from that person? But I don't think it's enough. And sometimes they say, you know, you are enough. No, you're not. You've got to fill your life with things that make you feel good. Start getting skills together that you know that reflect you and who you are, that you can see who you are in the eyes of others, that they enjoy your company. Learn to do comedy, learn to sing. You know, apart from, learn to do something, whether it's spiritual healing, whether it's doing the tarot, learn to do something that you get an immediate response from, because in therapy, you will start understanding yourself, but it takes a long time to start getting the praise that you deserve, that you haven't had for so long. So find something you're good at, cooking, have dinner parties, be the host, be the center of attention yourself for a while. See what that is like, because all narcissists thrive on attention and they've taken it away from you. So get something that will give you the center of attention for a little bit of time. Be with friends that you can enjoy their company, they can enjoy yours. So while you're doing your therapy, to understand what the hell was that about, trying to make sense of it. Also write notes to yourself. Write down the pros and cons of that person or a series of boyfriends that you've been with. You might find that every single boyfriend is the same, or girlfriend is the same in some way, with different color hair and different eyes, but fundamentally wanting the same thing from you. And it's only when you can imagine yourself in another room and you're outside and you're looking at yourself through a glass and going, oh my gosh, that was me. But you also have to have validation that you are not the person that he said you are or she says you are. And women can be just as spiteful and just as horrendous. So it's giving yourself something that makes you feel good by cooking dinner for people. That is great. And every time somebody says something lovely to you, write it down and pin it up in front of you. Read it every morning. Make sure your friends tell you how amazing you are.
Can I butt in and say something?
Yeah,
is that okay?
Yeah.
I was going to say, the way I dealt with it, if that's a way of putting it, is when I realised that things weren't quite right, because I obviously go with my gut, and there are points in time where you really question yourself because you feel like you're going insane. You kind of lose your sanity, you'll question yourself, well, they can't really be doing this because they love me. So how I dealt with it, I went to a women's refuge and I asked if that behaviour was normal. No, it wasn't. So I questioned it even more. I went to a women's refuge. When I did finally get away from that situation, I spent a lot of time, I wasn't sitting with myself and dealing with it. Everything was a deflection. So everything I could do to not sit with my feelings, not sit with myself, I'd go here, there and everywhere because I couldn't cope with it. I had to do that to begin with. Yeah. And it was only when I sat with myself and I let all the emotion out and I thought, I don't know who I am, what I'm supposed to be doing. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I couldn't function. I did do counselling. Didn't really do much for me, if I'm honest. It took a long time sitting with myself, releasing emotions, getting to know me again. Being on my own was the best thing. I couldn't cope with that before. I'd always been with somebody, I'd always been in a relationship. It was almost like I felt I needed to be in a relationship because it's all about self-love. It's people pleasing and, oh, I can give you this, I can do this for you. And I wasn't seeing why I was attracting toxic people. And it's because I didn't love myself enough. So to have that opportunity, it was, I mean, I fell to bits. I had to sit with myself for a long time and go, right, what am I doing? You know, and it has taken a long time. It's taken 5 years,
Hmm.
but yeah.
Well,
But,
number one, just well done.
Yeah, well done, Claire. Well done.
It's, you know, it's hard work, isn't it?
Mm.
It's painful. The pain that you go through is extraordinary.
It is very painful.
But the reason,
Yeah.
just to clarify
It
something.
is. I fell apart.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. But just to clarify something, counsellors are not the same training as psychotherapists. Psychotherapy, and I'm not saying that you went, the person you went to was not well trained, but just to clarify it for anybody else, a psychotherapist has much more in-depth knowledge about the games the mind can play. A counsellor doesn't always know that. They haven't always had that training in depth. They don't always do the deep mind, understanding the deep mind, let's put it that way. But it didn't work for you, and you managed to pull something out, but you did find something for yourself. And that is amazing. At what point did you actually turn around and spend time on your own? How long did it take before you could do that? Claire? Can you hear me, Claire?
Well, when I left, because can you stop doing that a minute, please? Because the connection's really bad. The connection's not fantastic for some reason. I don't know if you can hear me now.
Yes.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I left, I stayed with family for 6 months. It was probably about a year after where I moved, and it was just me and my daughter, and because everything was a distraction, there was always something going on. I didn't have to sit with myself. It wasn't until I moved into my own space that I went, I don't know what's, and I just kind of crumbled.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, how do I deal with this? I don't know who I am anymore. There was lots of the repetitive emotions. There was anger, lots of anger, fear, lots of different emotions, and they'd even out, and then I'd have them again, and then it would even out. And that was probably about a year after. And it was a year after, and I had to sit with those feelings. I couldn't run away from myself anymore. I had to sit with it.
But I think
the sooner you're able to sit with it and sift through it.
I think that's the key, isn't it? But it's very difficult to do it on your own. It's very difficult for a lot of people to be on their own. And I don't always say that you should leave and go on your own, because I think you do fall into that gap. I think it's great that you had people to turn to, and I wouldn't advocate, if you are leaving an abusive relationship, to be on your own. I would never advocate that unless you felt you could cope with that. But you need people who can watch you, observe you, caring with care, to look after you, because other people can observe when you're going downhill. That's why we need other people. Man is not an island, and that's the matter of the fact. We can't always see ourselves when we're coming through something so horrendous. Coming back to gaslighting, that's what they do. They pretend that you are lying. They pretend that you are going crazy. They pretend that you have done something that you haven't done, or that you have done something that you didn't do. So the lies, the cheating, all that is thrown on you. So you do end up with this disturbed sense of yourself. And even if you are in reality that person, you know what you're doing, suddenly you come out of a relationship and you are disturbed. You don't know who you are. But the key is, you've got to know that this person is going to destroy you, given the chance, because they don't want you to be happy. They don't want you to be successful. So keep out of their way. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said their partners, somebody's left their partner, they're with a new partner, they're doing really well. What should they do next? And I just said, don't let your partner know. Don't let the man you've left know that you're doing well, that you're successful, because that will annoy them. And that will make them very, very angry, because they don't have you anymore. and you had a unique supply for them. And this is what we've got to remember about relationships. They are so amazing when they work, because we do work, you know, suddenly you're connected, you're together, you're one. And there's that flow of feelings between you. But when it goes wrong, they're suddenly left. That person who is the abuser is left without that connection to somebody who totally understood them, who did supply it when they needed it. So when they raised their hand, they knew the other person would know, stop talking, I can stop now. So you automatically got into that dance because you learned how to get into that dance. The narcissist now has to go and find somebody else. If they find somebody else, you're in a better position. If they can find somebody else, but still don't let them know, because just keep out of their way as much as you can. Keep hidden. It doesn't mean you don't have to do what you do, but just keep out of the way. And it's very difficult for people. But when you've got children, you've got no choice. But if you show off, they will find you, and the extreme ones will find you, and they'll find a way. But there are people out there that will help you. And if somebody says, I will help you, then take their help. And don't always turn to the police, because the police are hamstrung. The police cannot do things, as we know, until somebody has actually been hurt physically, with proof, by the way. So, you know, and to go to the courts, it takes too long. So there's so many things like that. So you have to work it on your own. But if you've got brothers, they are so useful, or male friends, again, very useful to have to protect you.
Could I just add? So my ex, you know, as you described earlier on in the conversation, Maria, you know, she had issues from abandonment from her father because he was a big top guy. She was, you know, when I married her and her parents. I didn't marry, it wasn't a relationship of two, it was a marriage of her and her parents. And, you know, she was everyday conversation. Our private life was spoken to her parents. And she kind of played this sort of double-edged game where she felt like, well, I was abandoned, but I'm not abandoned because I'm still connected to him, and that's why I need you. And she had this sort of, I don't know, this very subtle art of controlling. And it, you know, it is over-consuming, and you do get blindsided by that.
You do.
And it's a bit confusing. And I'm not a narcissist by any means. I'm very empathetic, but I'm also pretty tough in terms of, you know, my position and things like that. Now, when the collision course between a narcissist and somebody who's got very strong morals and values, like I do, it's a recipe for a volcanic explosion. And what happened within my situation is that, you know, we had a child, and she said, right, I'm leaving England, I'm going back to France, and I'm going to control you via my son, via her son. And this control aspect, because of what she lost control when she lost control when she was younger of her family or whatever it was. She's now using my son, my 4-year-old son, as a form of control to control me. Yeah. And I, you know, going back to the legal thing is that, well, you know, they were a very, very wealthy family. They had 6 law firms against me, and I self-represented, and I won every single case because I was a cross-country runner, and so I'm determined to win, and that's just me. But still today, you know, it's all about this control. Even though we're not married, she lives in a different country. It's about control over our child, and that is what really annoys me, because I don't think children should be weaponized in that way because they're innocent. And I know there's unintended consequences of a divorce, but it's these traits that they just cannot let go. They cannot let go. So if I have my son over here in England, I get text messages every half an hour. Where are you? Send me a photo. What are you doing? Send me a photo. Where is he doing? Send me a photo. I ignore it. Then I get threatening messages. I'm calling up the police now because I think you're not answering my messages. And it's just absolute lunacy to me. and I, you know, and what I've learned out of all of this is that the narcissist, you have to fight fire with fire. Very simple. And it's soul destroying, because that's not in my nature. I'm not that type of person who fights back. I just, you know, sort of, I'm very much an empath, as you said earlier on. But I think what I've learned out of all of this is that you kind of have to let them, what I've learned now is that you kind of have to let them get on with what they want to say, and don't accept it. And quite frankly, I know this is being recorded, but you've got to tell them to bugger off in a polite, in a much more stronger manner. And then, you know, and in a sense, it's like I have to do so much hard work to stay in touch with my son, because she won't allow that contact to happen. So unless I do it, unless I continuously show him pester and pester and pester, she then says, well, you're just being, you're harassing me. You're doing this, you're doing that. The problem is the narcissist is so blinded by their own narcissistic values and what they've learned. And it's all about moi, as they would say, French frog, and me, that you just have to kind of say, well, sorry, that's not acceptable. And, you know, and still today, we have, you know, text wars like there's no tomorrow. And I ask for reasons and reasons. And of course, when you expose that they are being way too over controlling, they don't respond to it. They will not respond. And then, you know, if I say, I would like to have my son for the month of July, and you can have him for August, no response. Because the thing is that if she responds, she can't give a reason why I can't have my own son from France and England. And it's just this constant game. So I have to, with a narcissist, I have to take the fight into the ring, where it shouldn't be like that, because it's all about the child at the end of the day. But it's this controlling aspect, which is they just can't seem to let go. And they're blinded by their own narcissistic behavior, that they push it on other people. They never accept blame on themselves. It's always somebody else's fault. Oh, it's your fault. Oh, it's that fault. It's the pandemic's fault.
Yeah,
it's this fault. And
but if I can just say, you know,
exactly.
One thing is to understand their psychology, but I don't know how helpful that is, to be honest, because I think it can bring out the savior complex, and then you can end up like Russ's friend. If you understand them too much, it taps into your own, oh, poor thing. And I think for you, the difficulty is your son, you know, and for you is how do you manage it until your son is old enough to take a little bit more of the control himself. I want to be with daddy. I want to go over and see daddy, which he will, because you're loving dad. It's so difficult, the game that she's playing with you, but she is almost, when he leaves her, she's being abandoned by her son. That's what it taps into for her.
Hell will break loose when that happens.
And war breaks loose because you're going, leave me alone. I want my time with my son.
Yes.
And but she just, I know it's incredibly difficult. And that's why I think our world is so turned upside down nowadays, because she doesn't understand she's got to leave him alone and trust you that you're okay. But, you know, perhaps those words you need to tell her, trust me, he is fine.
Of course, I mean, I always do that, but that goes to that end straight out the other one.
Straight out the other one.
Control. You know, you can scream and shout all you want till the cows come home, but it just is. They just don't see it, and it's just one of those. And you know, as a lot of my friends and even Fee, you know, you just have to be constantly in there. You have to constantly fight for it. You can't give up.
No,
you just can't give up. That's what they want you to do.
Well, you can't give up, especially with your children. When I think any parent has to decide, you know, sort of, this is as far as I can go with my kids till they make up their own mind. But until that point, these are my children. And if you know that in a relationship, you will fight like hell to make sure that they stay with you.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is don't go through the courts if you can help it. And well done, you didn't have to. And you've got that sort of...
Actually. I did. I took it to the courts and I said, you're not going to win. and you know what, I'm going to put child arrangements orders against you, and this is the deal. And I fought, you know, thick and thin for that. And, you know, and quite frankly, thank God I had the child arrangements orders, because then I was legally allowed to go and see my son, because I was legally to have childcare. So, you know, even in the pandemic. So despite the hardship and the pain and the suffering and the, you know, the confidence, you know, deflation that went through me during that period of time, in a sense, I'm very grateful that I did actually fight as hard as I could. And I just know that when you deal with a narcissist, you just have to fight back.
But it will be now forever in the courts. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
With somebody like that, the courts will always be in play in your life. And I know people that have had the courts in their lives for the whole of their children's lives, which is so damaging. And I'm not saying that you have a choice, because it's worse if you weren't there.
It's not damaging for the child as much. I think it's more damaging for the other parent, because, you know, narcissists have got tremendous amount. They're very, somewhat ironically, they're very proud, and they think they know it all and everything else. And when you take them to the courts, it's like, oh, you know, I can't control this any longer. I'm having actually the courts to dictate how I need to be controlled and how I have to behave with the other parent. And it's actually, you know, I never, you know, everyone looks at the law as if it's a bad thing. I think the law is actually a good thing. It's there to protect people. And, you know, if you use the law wisely, and you use it cautiously, and you behave in the right manner, it actually works to your advantage, and you actually get through these narcissistic traits of your partner.
I do think that's worked for you, Marcus. I do know stories where it hasn't worked for people, or they've had to fight really hard for their children because of the lies that the other person can tell.
Totally understand.
Do you know what I mean? And I do think you are exceptional to be able to fight your own case. And I do think fighting your own case could be the way for a lot of people who are able to do it. But you have to be eloquent. You have to understand the rules of the game of the courts.
Exactly.
And I think you're very good. And that's what you're talking about.
I don't think people understand what the advantage of the law does against these types of behavioral traits of these people. Because, you know, they think it's more suffering and more embarrassment to go through the courts, and they rather just let them run the, you know, rule the roost, rather than, you know, take the roost away and say, here we go.
But I think it's important that your child sees you as a father.
Without a doubt. And you know, and the thing is that, you know, she tried to get 100% parental educational authority, tried to push me out, and I was not going to have any of it. Not going to have any of it, because the worst thing is that it's all about the narcissist. It's not about the child. And what you have to remove, you know, you have to put a child-centric approach in this matter. If you have children, I mean, and then I was in a relationship before we had a child, and it was, you know, when I look back at it, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors that narcissists do and behave. You know, they always play this game and everything else, and then, you know, bit by bit, the little small things come out. And then it just becomes, and when they don't get it their way, it just becomes an absolutely nightmare. And you're on the back foot, and you lose confidence, and you're just like, what do I do? You know, fortunately, I had a lot of friends, and I had a lot of inner strength in myself to say, I am not going to tolerate this any longer, because it's just not going to happen. And, you know, and that I think the inner strength of the person who is on the other side from a narcissist has to really dig deep into their soul to find that inner strength to really fight back. And it's hard. I trust me, it is hard, and it does change you.
It does change you.
But it's I think it's the best thing that I've ever done. One of the best things I've ever done in my entire life, because I've learned so much more about myself from my emotions and from all the ills that I've had and the invisible scars that I have and things like that. It was the best thing I could have done, and it's the best thing, most importantly, for my son, because at the end of the day, he's the most important thing.
I agree, and it's amazing that you've managed to fight in the way you have, and you see him in the way you do, and you make sure that you see him. And I think that's the most important thing for him. He will know that, and as he grows up, he'll know that that's what you've done.
Yeah,
I think that's what's key as well. And I would like to say that children know at the end of the day who's done what. I'm afraid they don't. But Sadly, they don't, but he will know that he's been loved. That's for sure.
You know, that's
just got-
worst return of investment are children.
I know. He said, my ex was better at fake news than Donald Trump and the press all in one. In fact, he went public with lies and front page views of me, even in a bikini. And the system hasn't still sorted out what is covered under the Malicious and Harassment Act. As a victim, the system makes it worse, not better for you. And I think you've got to know the game. I agree. And that's what I'm saying. You've got to understand what you're doing with law and understand who's on your side, what game you have to play, how you play it, and whether you've got the money to do it. Otherwise, you're at the beck and call of the courts that are the child courts, which have their own agenda every time.
But you also have to be able to afford the legal costs, which
That's it.
I haven't been able to do lately. I mean, I've sort of had an angel drop in my lap, which is the QC who's working pro bono for me.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, the Metropolitan Police are being held to account for not pursuing what has been a campaign of terror, as you know. I mean, to be published on the front page of the Daily Telegraph with your daughter in the picture and scramble, trying to ask favours for people to get her face removed, to have a 4-page spread.
I know.
400,000 times with lies and slander. And I've come out of it better in terms of everybody knew it was a lie, so they've been very supportive. But I've had over probably about 25 hours of intense police interviews. I've been asked about my sex life and everything. He's been put in prison twice overnight, but basically only been interviewed for about 4 hours.
Because they don't know what to do.
It's only now I've got this QC that the Metropolitan Police will be forced to do something. And so they go, oh, report someone who wolf whistles at you. And I'm like, I reported someone who tried to throw me out of a window over the paper, and they didn't do anything. So, you know, it's the system. It's fortunate that Marcus was able to use the system, but it's not an easy system.
No, it's very difficult. And well done you, Marcus, for doing that. Can I just read what Heather says? I've successfully managed to get the narcissist out of our lives. We have 2 children. I had to go to court. He was forced to leave the family home, but he continues to fight me and is appealing against the divorce and trying to control our lives. By the way, he is French, and I'm currently still living in our house in France, trying to get out and back to the UK.
You should, Marcus.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure if we can help you in any way, Heather, give you support. And I don't know if Marcus can help, because give any advice, Marcus, because maybe knowing, you know, this sort of trans channel legal system, he might be able to help you. And I must say, Marcus is a dynamo in his own right. And he won't let something go, which is amazing. And that might be very healthy and helpful for you, Heather. Because my big thing in my life now and our lives as women, we need men to support us, because the system is a masculine system, not male, masculine system. And you have to understand the game, and men understand the game far better than women do very often. So, you know, if you can send me something, Heather, and then I can sort of just ask Marcus, that might be useful. I really hope so, because I feel for you.
Yeah, Heather, please, if you talk to me, I'm happy to do it. I actually self-represented in French courts. I wrote letters to judge, and I Google translated them into French.
Did you?
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
I know, but that's the type of advice we need. And I do think we need more, you know, and it's great. Thank you for that. And Fee, but I do think we need that. And next time I'm doing stuff about women being abused, but also I am inviting men onto the program to be the spokespeople to help us understand how to handle abuse as well, because we can't do it on our own as women. I don't care what anybody says, men are still stronger. And there is a game here, and men understand that game far more than a lot of women do. And I'm not saying this doesn't denigrate women. Women are very highly intelligent, as men are, but it's like if I go onto a football pitch, I have to know the game in order to play. And you know, score a goal. And it's the same in court. It's the same if you're being harassed. It's the same. And men need to know that you are being protected. And frankly, another woman with you just won't do it. They're not frightened of another woman very often. So that will be for the next one as we do the next event. But we're going to wrap up now. It's now 8:30. And thank you so much for your stories, Fee and Marcus. Amazing stories. Heather, thank you for letting us hear your story, and Claire, and Liz for joining in, and Russ, who's now gone, and anybody else who will be watching and listening. Please send us through Speak Your Mind, and you've got the website up there, www.speakyourmind.global, and I'm Dr. Maria Kempinska. Ask any question. We're here to help, and we're here to help you speak your mind and get help. So thank you for joining.
And a big thank you, Maria, for everything that you've shared. For, you know, you've just been amazing.
Oh.
So much information, and wonderful as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, and hope to see you again. Bye, Claire.
Thank you,
Thank
Liz.
you. Bye.
Bye, Marcus.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.